This is CJ Baker, and every day I've been listening to a different randomly generated album that appears in the book, 1001 Albums to Hear Before You Died. So this is my third week of doing it, and just like I did in previous weeks, I'm gonna do a weekly recap video. So in a few moments, we're gonna be looking at each of the reviews of the 7 albums that I listened to this week. And all of these I previously posted as shorts, but because I was limited, I had to edit them down to 3 minutes. Some of these reviews will be expanded. So you will be getting some bonus content. And then afterwards, I'll be sharing some additional observations and I'll be sharing my updated rankings. So if you want me to keep making content like this, please like and subscribe. And I hope you enjoy. So today's randomly generated album is 21 by Adele, released in 2011. So this is the sophomore album by Adele, and as the title suggests, she was 21 years old at the time. So I don't know at what point in her career she's gonna stop naming her albums after her age. I mean, I know if I was to release that album right now, I wouldn't want to call it 49. But yeah, I don't necessarily have a big problem with Adele. I do think she's somewhat overrated by default just because of how huge she was. But I do think she has a good voice. I've seen her like accept like different awards, do her acceptance speech. I've seen some interview clips, and she comes across as someone that's likable and down to earth and seems to have a good sense of humor. So she does seem to be someone that's easy to root for. As far as overall how I feel about this album, it does lean a little bit too AC for my personal taste, but I don't hate it. There's songs on it that I like. Like, for example, it opens fairly strong. Like, the first 2 tracks, Rolling in the Deep, Rumor Has It, are both solid tunes. The third track, Turning Tables, is a little bit too schmaltzy for me, but Setting Fire to the Rain is a solid song. I like that tune. So, yeah, the songs I really like on it. There's also songs like cover of the Cure Love Song, and I love the Cure, and I love that tune, like the original, but I hate Adele's version. It's absolutely horrendous. So she replaces like the gloomy gothiness of the Cure with just like 20 pounds of fromage. Like it's absolutely terrible. As far as the closing track, Someone Like You, I'm actually on the fence about that song. Like it is a bit schmaltzy, but I think the song does what it's supposed to. Like afterwards, while you listen to it, you feel like ugly crying and eating like a gallon of Haagen-Dazs. So I think the song works for what it's supposed to do, but it's probably not a good song to listen to if you're on a diet. Never mind, I find someone like you. I wish nothing but the best for you too. Don't forget me, I beg. I remember but yeah, overall, it's still a decent album. I don't hate it. It's not my wheelhouse, but it's not bad for what it is. So I'll give it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly selected album is Urban Hymns by the Verve, released in 1997. So the album opens with by far the biggest hit, Bittersweet Symphony. And it is an excellent song. Like, it is a bit ubiquitous, and there's the whole familiarity breeds contempt. But I do really like the song, and it's an excellent way to open the album. Of course, it's easy to feel bad for the band because for a number of years, the band didn't make any money off it because they sampled a orchestral arrangement of a Rolling Stones song the last time. But because of that sample, for a number of years, 100% of the royalties went to Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, but apparently it's been sorted out now. But yeah, that's a strong opener. The next song on the album is Sonnet, which is also a really solid song. The next track, The Rolling People, it starts off good, but then it starts to meander, and the song's over like 7 minutes long. So if you cut that to it in half, it's probably a good song. But then it redeems itself with the next song, The Drugs Won't Work, which is by far my favorite song on the album. It's just a really gorgeous, emotional tune. And there's also a version done by Ben Harper that I love as well. But then after that song, it does start to fall off a bit and the album starts to lag. I mean, there's still a couple of decent deep cuts. Like I like the song Space and Time and Velvet Morning. The other well-known tune on the album is Lucky Man, but that song's just okay for me. But overall, it's a good album, but it is kind of generic Britpop. It's also over 75 minutes long, which was an issue with the CD era. There's a lot of albums that were just too long, and this album suffers from that as well. But 15 of those minutes, it should be noted, were because of the hidden tracks. And in my teens, I actually always loved CDs when they had hidden tracks. And there were some albums where my favorite song on the album was the hidden track. So I don't necessarily have a big issue there, but even if you remove the 15 minutes of those hidden tracks, it was still 60 minutes and it still lagged a bit. But overall, it was still a good album. There were still some good songs. So I'll give it 3.5 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Medúlla by Björk, released in 2004. Most of Björk's albums could be a bit experimental and weird, but despite that weirdness, can also be accessible. Like they quite often do have songs that are legitimate bangers as well. But this particular album is by far her least accessible and most avant-garde. So the album is mostly a cappella, so the vast majority of the sounds you're hearing, the only instrument is the human voice. And sometimes when you think of a cappella, you might think of something like Pitch Perfect or like college university a cappella groups. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but a lot of that's kind of corny. Well, that's not what this album is. And there's some interesting vocal layering going on that really creates some cool effects. So yeah, the album is experimental and it can be a bit divisive. Like I mentioned, how some of other albums do have bangers, but there's no real bangers on this album. There's nothing you can sing in the shower. There's nothing that you can play in the background of a dinner party. I mean, maybe if the dinner party is a bunch of Icelandic hipsters. So yeah, in many ways, the album does come across as disjointed, so it could be a bit of a challenging listening experience. But personally, I find it very fascinating and compelling, and read just the idea of what can be accomplished with the human voice. And a couple of the album's highlights include Oceana, which does have moments of weirdness, but there's some moments of beauty as well. And I also love the track Mouse Cradle, which has a lot going on vocally. So yeah, there's like things going on. Like on the entire album, there's things like the mouth trumpet, beatboxing, some gorgeous choral arrangements, and then a number of the tracks feature Canadian Indigenous throat singer Tanya Tagaq. And I'm actually a fan of Tanya Tagaq, but a lot of her music, like basically like the Indigenous throat singing, it really produces that guttural effect, which can be a bit jarring to listen to, but it's also kind of compelling and it's kind of fascinating the fact that the human voice can produce those sounds. So yeah, like I mentioned, it might not be an album for everyone. I think you kind of have to be in the right headspace for it. But I do think it's a very interesting album to listen to. And for the most part, I did like the album. So I give the album 4 stars. Today's randomly generated album is Here Are the Sonics by the Sonics, released in 1965. So this is a garage rock band from Tacoma, Washington, which is just outside of the Seattle area. I think you can consider this as part of the lineage that led to grunge and the 90s alternative rock boom. So in many ways, this could be considered a foundational punk rock album. So definitely proto-punk. So I really like the original tracks on the album. So there's four of them: The Rich, Boss Hoss, Psycho, and Striking. And they all have a very edginess and griminess to it, which is really cool and kind of ahead of its time as well. But the other eight tracks on the album are covers, and that's where it starts to, I say, lose the plot a little bit. Like the covers are a bit of a mixed bag. Like I do love the cover "Have Love Will Travel," and this is probably the definitive version of this song. Like the only other version of it I heard was the original by Richard Berry, and I do like this version better. And once again, has a real punky edginess. As far as the other covers, I don't mind their cover of "Money," but it's not really a definitive version. Like there's probably at least a half a dozen versions better than it. And as far as the other covers go, it's kind of like going to a bar and listening to like a 60s tribute act. So they're just kind of okay. But overall, it's still a good album. It's just short of 30 minutes, so the perfect length. It's a bit unfortunate that there wasn't more originals because the originals were solid. It showed hints of greatness that unfortunately the band never fully realized. But like I said, it's definitely, you can see how this is a foundational album in the development of punk. So yeah, overall, I'll give the album 3.5 stars. It had some untapped potential, but it was still an enjoyable listening experience. Today's randomly generated album is Hail to the Thief by Radiohead, released in 2003. A while back, I did a Radiohead tier rank video where I ranked all their albums, and this was my fourth favorite Radiohead album. So this album followed Kid A and Amnesia. And I know as a Radiohead fan, I'm a bit in the minority. Even though I don't hate those albums, I never fully connected to Kid A and Amnesiac. So this might be the bit of a hot take, but I prefer Hail to the Thief ahead of those albums. So especially Kid A, because Kid A is widely regarded as one of Radiohead's all-time great albums. But I do love this album, and I think part of what makes me love the album is it's a good bridge album. Like it really takes all of the different aspects and elements of Radiohead and merges them together. And it also happens to be, I would say, Radiohead's most political album. I mean, there's always, on every Radiohead album, there's always elements of social commentary. Like, for example, with OK Computer, Tom York was reading a lot of Noam Chomsky at the time, but this is probably the most politically direct. Like a lot of the songs are critical of the Bush administration. It involves critique of the Gulf War. And there's also a couple of songs that address the issue of climate change, which was a topic that Tom York would comment on a few different times throughout his career, both with Radiohead and as a solo artist. So it opens really strong with the first three tracks. 2 + 2 = 5. Awesome tune. Sit down, stand up, then Sail to the Moon, which is a very gorgeous song, which he wrote as a lullaby to his son Noah. And also appropriately, the song contains allusions to Noah's Ark, and there's some commentary there that could also connect to climate change. And there's even a line about the president. And so, yeah, there's also some social commentary that's within that song. Other highlights on the album, There. Excellent song. Love that tune. And then there's also I Will, which is a very chilling tune. And York described this song as basically some of the angriest lyrics that he's written, even though it doesn't necessarily come across as angry, it comes across as more mournful. But this was Tom's response to news footage of bomb shelters being bombed during the Gulf War, and this included the death of a number of innocent children. So yeah, definitely a powerful song with a powerful message. But yeah, I just love the entire album. I give the album 5 stars. Well, today's randomly selected album is Larks, Tongues, and Aspic by King Crimson, released in 1973. So I previously mentioned when I discussed the Genesis album that I was not a big fan of prog rock. Well, let's just say King Crimson is more proggy than Peter Gabriel era Genesis. I mean, I did in the past listen to a couple of King Crimson albums. Like I listened to the 1969 debut in the Court of the Crimson King. And I will say I didn't hate that album. And part of the reason is I love the song 21st Century Schizoid Man. Like that song, that's just genuine banger, like that song rocks. The other album I listened to by them is the 1974 album Red. And let's just say that was a slog to get through. So unfortunately, this album had nothing even remotely close to 21st Century Schizoid Man, and it was even more of a slog than Red. And it started off really on a very bad note, like the opening track, Lock Tongues and Aspect Part 1. It was over 13 minutes long. It was instrumental. It was just really bloated. They were doing a bunch of things more because they could, not because they should. So yeah, that song was just really ponderous. It already put me in a bad mood for the rest of the album. Fortunately, the second track, Book of Saturday, it was a lot less proggy, but it was just really bland. And then the rest of the album, it starts to get progressively more proggy, and there's some excessive guitar noodling. Then it really drops off the cliff with the final 2 tracks, the talking drum, and then part 2 of Locks, Tongues, and Aspic. So both of those are instrumental tracks, and once again, just really excessive and just everything I absolutely hate about prog. So yeah, I just strongly disliked this album. So I'm gonna give it 2 stars. I mean, I don't want to slag on the band too much because I realize they're talented musicians. They're very influential in the development of prog. But I just gotta be honest, like this just wasn't for me. It was it was just a slog to get through, and I never want to listen to it again. Randomly generated album is Autobahn by Kraftwerk, released in 1974. And Kraftwerk was a very important band in the German krautrock scene and was influential in the development of electronic music. So this album was very much dominated by the title and opening track, which was close to 23 minutes. So it was more than half the length of the entire album. I'm not always a fan of long songs, and you could argue this song is a little bit long. Might be all shorter versions that you can listen to as well. But I think for the most part, the song justifies its length. And the whole idea of the song was to simulate the experience of driving on the Autobahn. I've never driven on the Autobahn, so I have no idea what it would be like. But I can imagine it would be a cool experience driving on the Autobahn while listening to Autobahn. And also it does take you on the journey and it does have different twists and turns. So I think the song basically does what it's supposed to. And at times it can actually be a fun song as well. It could be fun to sing along to Fawn, Fawn, Fawn off the Autobahn, which I used to always sing it as fun, fun, fun on the Autobahn, which was a common misconception, which in my case, I don't know if it was really a misconception because I kind of knew the song was German. It's just in my brain, it was the natural way of singing that. And there were those that thought that it was a shout out to the Beach Boys song, Fun, 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 but it wasn't. And Fun, Fun, Fun basically means drive, drive, drive. So it basically means drive, drive, drive on the Autobahn. But yeah, it's a classic song. And there's four other songs on the album, which the other songs are perfectly fine. I'm sure it's also fun to listen to those songs while driving on the Autobahn. But unfortunately, they all swallowed up a bit by the behemoth of the Autobahn. So I don't know what you could do about that. I mean, one option is maybe instead of opening the album, you could have closed the album and maybe have those four songs build up to it. The other option is sometimes bands with long songs break them up into multiple parts, but I don't know. In this case, I kind of like the idea of having it as one epic song. But yeah, overall, really good album. I enjoyed listening to it. And you also have to look at the album in the context that it was released in 1974. So this was years before techno, electronica, and EDM. So this album was way ahead of its time. Also, if you were to make a list of influential bands based on how many genres and subgenres that they influenced, there's very few bands that have influenced as many genres and subgenres as Kraftwerk. I gave the album 4 stars. That concludes a recap of week 3. So this is a review. We'll look at the updated rankings. So 1 and 2 albums stay the same. The White Stripes Elephant and Bob Dylan bringing it back home. But we have a new 5-star album, Radiohead, Hail to the Thief, which now takes the number 3 slot. Then the only other major change is we have a new bottom album, King Crimson, Larks, Tongues, and Aspic. So as far as any other authorizations, like I said, there was only one new 5-star album. And for the most part, I would say out of the 3 weeks I did this exercise, overall this has been the weakest week, but there's still been some good, interesting listens as well. But then, of course, the other question we got to ask, which we asked every week, the albums that I listened to this week, do they belong in the book of 1001 albums you must hear before you die? And I think I messed up that title at the intro of my video. But yeah, obviously, the whole you must, that's very hyperbolic. Like you could obviously never listen to any of these albums and live a perfectly happy life. But basically the question is, are they considered essential enough to be on this type of list? And I think this week, I think you could argue with most of the albums. The one I'd be more inclined to argue against would be the Verve. Even though I like the album, I think it is kind of a bit of a generic Britpop album. And I think there are other Britpop albums that are more significant. So if I do like a tier list, it would probably be like B tier. But I think that's still significant enough that you can make an argument. And then as far as my least favorite album, like The King Crimson, I can at least acknowledge that it's considered to be a significant album in the development of prog rock. So I don't have to like an album to acknowledge its merits. So yeah, that concludes the video. What did you think of the albums this week? Would you include them in your personal list of the best albums that you must listen to? Did you like them? Dislike them? Let me know in the comments. And if you disagree with my opinion and think I'm an idiot, let me know as well. Please do so in a respectful way. So yeah, I'm going to keep making these videos, or at least if you want me to keep making these videos, like and subscribe, hit the notification button so you don't miss any future videos. And also, like I said, these videos are posted on a daily basis as shorts, so you can check that out. And I also have them curated as a playlist as well, so easily to watch playlist, so you can check that out as well. And you can also check out my website, ongoinghistoryofprotestsongs.com.